Hey there, it's Lenny Magill with the GlockStore Performance and Custom Shop right here in San Diego, California. And today we are going to do an installation procedure for a striker, a Glock Striker, also known as a Glock Firing Pin. And those terms are somewhat interchangeable, and so you may ask yourself, well, what's the difference? Well, striker fire is a kind of a different mechanism than a traditional firing pin. If you think about a firing pin in a 1911, say, the firing pin basically gets struck by a hammer. All right, so it's the hammer, it actually hits the firing pin and makes it go forward, which makes the round go bang, in a sense, because it hits the primer and ignites the round and the bullet flies out the barrel. Whereas a striker fire, you actually pull back on the firing pin and there's spring pressure there. You pull back on the firing pin with the trigger. As you manipulate the trigger, it pulls back and then the striker falls off of the trigger bar and moves forward. So that's called striker fire versus traditional firing pin. However, I will tell you that when I first started in Glock, 30 years ago, it was a striker. And now it's a firing pin, which the mechanism hasn't changed, but everybody says it's a firing pin. We still call it the striker. In fact, today we're going to go ahead and show you the installation procedure of this skeletonized striker we make versus the factory striker. Now, the installation procedure is basically the same. The question you're going to ask yourself is, why would I want a skeletonized striker? Well, a skeletonized striker or firing pin is lighter in weight than the factory. Now, why would it be better when it's lighter in weight? Well, because it's a little bit lighter, it travels a little bit faster, which means that it gets to the primer faster and ignites around faster. And these are really milliseconds. But it does make a difference in accuracy because as you're squeezing the trigger, the gun is always moving a little bit. Once you have those sights lined up, you want it to go off when you want it to go off. And if it goes off a little bit faster, there's less likely to be movement away from that perfect sight picture. The other thing that is very important about this skeletonized striker that we manufacture and offer is that the tip is approximately 2/1000ths longer than the factory. And because of that, it helps avoid light strikes. Okay, still safe, but the tip is just a little bit longer that allows it to get a little bit more oomph and avoid those light strikes. So that being said, this is the unit we're going to install. It's available for both your 9mm, 40 calibers, and 357s. It's also a different unit for your 45 and your 10mm, a little bit longer. Same design, just a little bit longer. So this is the piece. Let me go ahead and take it out of the packaging here. And then we'll look at our gun. So here it is. Get a good look at it. Come on in here close. You can see that it is, in fact, skeletonized, which means that we have taken a little bit of the material off this, as well as drilled some holes in there. So let me pull it off its packaging properly. And we tape it in here so it's nice and neat when you get it. And there's your package. And there's the actual unit itself. And you see the holes, you can see how it's been cut out a little bit. And this one is coated in titanium nitride. The reason we coat them is because the titanium nitride is a hard surface. It is also very lubricous, if that's a word. It has a lower coefficient of friction than the standard steel itself. So it is a little slipperier, which allows it to move a little bit better, makes it a little bit lighter on your trigger pull. So that's very important. So the trigger bar interacts with that lug right there. We're going to show you that as we take this gun apart. So there's the piece we're going to install. And again, this installation procedure will work with basically any Glock because all the Glocks really work with the same mechanism in a sense as far as the firing pin or striker goes. Okay, so we're going to be working today with a Glock 17 Gen 4, out of the box, fresh, okay? And I'm going to go ahead, the first thing I'm going to do is remove the magazine. It is empty, of course, that's a good sign, right? But I don't know if there's a round in here or not, so my first objective is keep my finger off the trigger, keep the gun pointed in a safe direction, and pull the slide back and visually inspect that there are no rounds inside. A couple more racks. Squeeze the trigger in a safe direction. Now we've got a safe firearm, and now we can actually work on it, okay? And let me take this moment right here to say this, that most accidents happen right here when you're cleaning or maintaining or installing parts in your gun and you didn't know it was loaded. So this is a time to be super careful. In fact, I always say this, and well, it's worth saying again. There's no ammunition on this table. None of the magazines are loaded. There's no ammunition in this room. So there's no way that I could inadvertently load this and go bang, because that's what happens. You know, I mean, it's very easy to load a magazine, rack the slide, pull the trigger, and oh. So first objective is always keep that gun pointed in a safe direction. Second objective is make sure you know this unloaded. And third objective, when you're doing cleaning and maintenance, don't have any ammunition on the table, and certainly try to even keep it out of the room. All right, so there's our safety tip for today. Now you can actually access this firing pin without even taking the slide off. So I'll show you how to do that really quickly, and then we'll move on. So I'm gonna go ahead and rack the slide back and use the slide stop lever to hold the slide back. I'm gonna just push that up. So there it is. You're gonna notice underneath here, right here, is the lug, the actual firing pin lug. See that? That lug right there, it's sticking down like so. So it kind of sits in there like this. All right, so we're seeing just this tip right here. So that's it. Now what's happening, two things are happening here. We have some spring pressure that is capturing this whole piece together with the slide cover plate. So as we pull this out, you'll see there's an assembly. And the assembly, it consists of the firing pin spring, the spring cups, and a spacer sleeve. All right, and what is happening is that spacer sleeve is taking spring pressure and pushing up on the back side of the slide cover plate. And because there's spring pressure upwards, it's capturing that there, and because of that, you really can't take this off the slide cover plate to gain access to the striker unless you remove that spring pressure, and that is done quite simply like this. So we're going to go underneath here, we're going to lift up the striker, okay, because it's in the fired position when it's down, and when it's up, it's in a non-fired position, it's back, okay? So I lift it up, and underneath you're going to see that little plastic piece that we talked about, which is the spacer sleeve. Now that spacer sleeve is spring loaded, so watch this. I'm going to push it down. Going to go in there. See how it comes right back up. That's the spring pressure we're going to remove to go ahead and take this slide cover plate off. So the process is like this. Take your punch, get inside there, depress that spring, and then thumb that slide cover plate off. Now, it's very important you keep your thumb over top there because we don't want any of these parts to fly away because there are some springs in there. There's two different springs. The striker spring, which typically is not going to be a problem, but the other spring is the safety depressor, excuse me, the extractor depressor plunger spring. That spring is sometimes gets a little goofy, and the actual detent, the plastic detent, sometimes flies away, and then your gun will not work because you are missing a $2 part. All right, that's the slide cover plate. Comes right off. I got my thumb over top there, just to be careful. And now let me go ahead and show you what I'm talking about. If we look inside here, you're going to see there's a little black piece of plastic, and then another piece of black plastic. That's the spacer sleeve, and this is the extractor depressor plunger bearing. And that's actually just a little piece of plastic that's stuck inside of the spring. And I'm going to just pull it up just a little bit for you to see that spring there. Okay, now I don't really have to take that out, but that's what that looks like. So let me show you that real quick. And that piece of plastic can sometimes, bing, fly away. All right, so now I've gained access to the striker by taking the slide cover plate off, and I'm going to go ahead and just lift the striker assembly out, and it comes straight out like so. And that is the entire striker assembly right there. All right, so let's go ahead and do the nomenclature. We have the actual firing pin itself. That's the steel part. The spacer sleeve is a piece of plastic. It's spring loaded. Okay, see that? And that, remember, that pressure was what was up onto the back side of the slide cover plate. So you see that little half circle right there? And you see that half circle right there? Well, they intersect, and that's what keeps that whole thing together. So this doesn't fall out by itself, and this keeps centered up. Now, the other thing that's very tough here, of course, are these little spring cups. We're going to talk about those very shortly. They capture the firing pin spring onto this whole assembly. So it's kind of a neat thing. It's actually pretty darn amazing when you think about it, how Gass and Glock invented this thing and really, you know, made it so simple and inexpensive. Because really, there's, you know, a lot of plastic parts that work for a long time. I don't know, you know, that this spacer sleeve would ever wear out, to be honest. And the spring cups, I haven't really seen them wear out either. I have had a lot of people lose them. So that's where we're going to be careful here. Now, the spring cups are cups. There's two of them, and they kind of go around, boom, like this, the striker, if you imagine a striker in between here. And the bottom side captures that spring, but these guys go here. So what I've got to do is I've got to take the spring down, and these cups are just going to fall off of the firing pin. You're going to notice right here on the firing pin, there's a little neck right here. See if we can get in a little closer. And that neck is what actually grabs hold of these little spring cups. So you can see how delicate in a sense it is, but then again, how ingenious it is, because it does work, and it works repeatedly, thousands and thousands of times. All right, so this is the replacement piece. This is the factory assembly. We're going to take all these parts off here and put them onto the replacement piece. The one thing I will tell you is that we do offer a variety of different spring weights to allow you to get a lighter trigger pull. And that's why, one of the reasons why we have an extended tip. Because the tip is extended, it will work better with the lighter springs. We have a 2-pound spring, a 3-pound spring, a 4-pound spring, a 4.5-pound spring. So and a 5, of course. And this is the 5.5 is what comes with the factory. We do also offer a 6. Some people say, hey, you know what? I'm shooting primers that are from Europe, and you know, especially Russia or some of these Baltic countries. The primers are very hard, and they need a heavier spring, because this spring dictates how fast and how much energy the striker has going forward. It also dictates how much pull you have on the trigger. So, you know, there's a couple things you can do to lighten your trigger. Certainly the 3.5-pound connector is one, but this spring is really the guts of it. So if you take the spring, you know, from 5 down to a 4-pound spring, you're going to have a lighter trigger pull. Now, of course, with our pyramid trigger, we shorten it and have a lighter trigger pull. So we make it better in 2 ways. This way, you're going to make it better one way, where you actually just remove the spring and put a lighter spring in there. And it'll have a lighter pull, because as you pull the trigger, you're pulling back on that spring. All right? So that's really, you know, thing to keep in mind, because you're actually grabbing hold of the lug right here. So this is, you're grabbing hold of that, and it's kind of doing that. Boom, and then it falls off and springs forward. So if you see that whole motion here. So as you pull the trigger bar grabs hold of that lug, squeezes it, and lets it go forward. And if we look inside here, let's see here if I can do this real quick here. I'll show you the trigger bar here real quick. This is the trigger bar, that's what I'm talking about right here. This little tail of the trigger bar is what grabs hold of the lug of the striker. Okay? Now, because ours has titanium nitride right there, it comes off a little bit easier, a little less friction. So that's some of the advantages of what we're doing here. So all these things kind of add up. A little lighter spring, a little lighter on the material, and then the actual coating really give you a better, smoother trigger. Okay, let's go for the disassembly of this firing pin assembly. Okay, first thing we're going to go ahead and do is take our spring cups off. Now this is really important that you are aware that they will go flying across the room if you don't do this right. So there's no easy way. You just got to put it on the table and compress the spring downwards. And there they are right there. And here are the 2 springs. There's one side, and here's the other. Okay, now that spring has still got a lot of pressure on it, so I'm going to just walk it right off. And there's the spring. Voila. Okay, and there's your spacer sleeve. See how it gives you space for the spring. And there's the factory striker. Boom. Very simple. Now, a couple things I want to talk about the Striker real quick before we put it in here. One, they do break. Okay, there's a lot of action here. I've seen them break. I've seen, in my years of doing Glock stuff, I've seen lots of Strikers break, both factory as well as ours. The weakest point, of course, is the blade at the top. It's the thinnest point, and that's typically what we see. We see a blade get just snapped off. And again, it happens with factory, happens with ours. That is sometimes after shooting 10, 20, 30,000 rounds, yeah, it's gonna break. So if you get one of these, factory or the skeletonized striker, and you see that you've shot a bunch of rounds with it, you've had it for a year or two, and it breaks, it's not a warranty situation. You just got to get another one. They just break. Things break. These are guns that are going back and forth. Sometimes stuff happens. But the one thing I want you to be aware of are these cuts right here. You should be aware that this cut on both of these guys is very important because it is part of the safety mechanism. If you start to see wear here, again, it's time to replace this. Although I will tell you that more than likely the safety plunger is going to wear first. Sometimes we do see some problems here. Not often. Like I said, the most egregious thing that we've seen, the biggest problem we've seen is the tip breaks off. Now, if you had the gun for a week or two and the tip breaks off, yes, that's a warranty situation. All right, but if you shoot 10 or 20 or 30,000 rounds through it and the tip breaks off, it's like driving your car, 40,000 miles and saying, hey, I need new tires. Well, yeah, you got to buy tires because they do wear out. All right. So now, why would you change this? Again, this one's a little bit lighter. The tip is a little bit longer, and it's coated in titanium nitride, and it gives you a little smoother action. That's why you would change it out. It does work, and all of our competition shooters use an extended tip striker with this this titanium nitride coating. Now, to reassemble this assembly, there's a little trick here that I got to show you. And basically, we're going to use our slide. But first, let me go ahead and show you, what we're going to do. We're going to put our spacer sleeve on, okay? And it comes over and it's just going to slide right on, just like so. And it gets anchored. Now, what the objective is to put the spring on, then capture it with the spring cups. It's very difficult to do that because when you put this down here, you'll see that the striker wants to fall down, and then it's very difficult to actually get any action. So the trick is to take the slide, put a nose down, and use the slide as a brace, just like that. Okay. Now, I'm blocking the slide with the lug, and it's allowing me to manipulate the spring without having that spacer sleeve move around. So here's what we do. We put our spring on, okay, and then we have our spring cups. Now this is where it gets to be a little dicey. So what I'd like to do is kind of preload them, get them all lined up, and be ready to put them on. But you're going to notice here, what we're going to do is we're going to put this spring cup on, and see if we can get in here really close. And it's going to go on, and it's going to sit right here. I'm going to put 1/2 on for you to look at. Oops. And these things, if you lose these in your shag carpet, call us. We've got replacements. We can overnight them for you for $25 or something stupid like that. I think it's a $4 or $5 part. But people lose them all the time. And so there's what it looks like. So if you see, I've got the 1/2 on, and I'm going to show you the other side. So it basically goes up here like so, and there's the one side. Yep. And you can see how, and I can flip it around. You see what's going to happen is the spring is actually going to come up here and get caught on the lip of it, like that. Oh, let me get my finger out of the way. Okay, so I think you get it, hopefully. And so now I'm going to use the slide, put that in backwards, put my spring on. And it actually works better when you have a vise because you can have 3 hands here. So let's see here. I don't have a vise today, so what I'm going to do is put it back on top of the gun because that'll give me a little bit more to hold on to. Okay. So here we go. Alrighty. So now here's what we're going to do. We're going to depress this like so. And we're going to put our spring cups on. Okay? Get my hands all ready. And here we go. It's down. Spring cup A is going to go onto the one side. Oops, come on now. And spring cup B is going to go on the other side. And there's no magic here. It's just a lot of work. Now, I got it, just like that. Sorry I couldn't show you better because you really have to put your hands all over it so these things don't go flying away. So basically, you know, what we did is we got put the first one on, got the second one on while maintaining the spring below those. Once you get them around the actual striker itself, then you let the spring go up and capture them. So now the spring has been captured by the spring cups. Now, there's one thing I do want to point out. Glock states that you want to make sure that the end of the spring does not intersect with the split in the cups. And I'm pretty close. I'm okay right now because what could happen is that as it fires, that end of the spring could work its way into that thing. But I think I'm okay. I can barely see the little crack right there. It's right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this down just a little bit more and just rotate them around a tad. Just like that. So now I'm better off. So the objective is just to try not to have the split of the two cups intersect with the end of the coil because you don't want that to work its way up into there. And let's see, I think I'm good, but I'm going to move it just a little bit more. There we go. That's better. Okay. So now there is the assembly. And again, you can always purchase extra springs and spring cups and spacer sleeves because you may lose those at some point. Now, to put this back in, I'm going to lock the slide back. Striker goes in, obviously, with a lug down. There it is, right? Okay, so now, put the slide cover plate back on. Basically, what you're going to do now is just kind of preload this up here like so. I use the fat part of this punch to just push down the spacer sleeve, and then the skinny part of the punch is going to push down this extractor depressor plunger, and there it is. Now, you'll see we have a gold striker, and I will tell you, has a little lighter trigger pull. I can feel it just enough on the back there. Still the same stroke, but it comes off, the trigger bar falls off just a little easier with a little less pressure. Still feels good. Boom. Excellent. I think we've got ourselves a winner now. And last thing I'm going to do is show you a little test here real quick. Let me find a pen. So I said, let me find a pen, and voila, there's a pen. Imagine that. Okay, here's the little test that we like to do now. We've installed a striker, and this is always a good idea to see, you know, if you're not getting, you know, the gun's not going bang sometimes, you know, of course, with an empty gun, you go ahead and drop a pencil or a pen in there, rack the slide, and voila. So obviously I'm making connection here and pushing it out. That's really what we're trying to prove, is that it does work. Boom. Yes, it does. Coming up every time there. And boom. So we can see it rising, which is the key. So that's the installation process of our new, and it's not really new, we've had these skeletonized strikers for a long time, but of the skeletonized striker that we know is a great tool for you. But the process works with all the strikers. And hopefully I've helped you save some time and some effort and any kind of frustration that may come along with improving or customizing or maintaining your Glock. I'm Lenny Magill. This, of course, is the GlockStore Performance and Custom Shop right here in San Diego, California. And if you are ever in Southern California, I invite you to come on down and drop into our retail store. It's a great shop, and I think you're going to be very impressed. Thanks for watching.